Hello and welcome. Now we are going to talk about a very important concept with LLMs called context length. Now let's say you visit one of the websites of Llama, or even I would say ChatGPT, and you will actually see a reference to context length. So if I read this, it says we have quantized only instruct versions of Llama 3.2, and these are quantized models have a reduced context length of 8K, right? And then says if you want details, you can look into the model card. So let's open the model card. And in the model card, you see that you have reference to Llama 3.2 and you have also reference to Llama 3.2 quantized, right? But the important thing to note here is the context length. The context length here with Llama 3.2 is 128K, much higher, and 3.2 quantized is 8K. Now the question arises, what exactly is this context length? Now to understand this context length, I would say let's try and understand this figure first and then we can look into more details. So what this figure says is, let's say this is the total amount of available memory to you, right? Or you can say this is the total context that is context length that is available to you. Now, when you have the first prompt could be, you can say that, okay, write me a story, right? You are asking the LLM to write you a story. Right, it starts responding, and this is the kind of, like, you can say, the area of memory that is utilized, and this is like the kind of remaining available memory, and this would be used for your future prompts, right? So this would be used for your future prompts. Now what happens, and remember, this is what your total context length is. If you go over and above it, what happens? This is what we want to see. So it says second iteration maxes out the available context length and pushes the first words out of LLM's memory. So what happens is, this is here, the second prompt comes. Let's say the second prompt comes and it starts generating the new response. But as soon as you cross this total context length, this will age out. So this will age out. That is very important. So because your entire context length has maxed out, so it will age out, and you won't, or your memory won't store the previous part, or it won't store the first prompt or this part of memory, right? This would be gone, and only this is available and this is available. So that is where context length comes into picture. Now the question is, what is the definition of context length? So context length refers to the maximum amount of text. Remember, with LLMs, a text is always broken into tokens, right? So it is a maximum amount of text or tokens that the model can remember and process. And it's very important that it's a sum total. Remember that this is always a sum total of the input and the output tokens, right? Always a sum total of input and output tokens. Now we take an example. Let's say your model has a 4096 token length, right? You can say the context length is 4096. So what it means, if LLM has context length of 4096, it can read, understand, and generate response based on up to 4096 tokens, right? Now let's say if your input token has used something like 2000 tokens. So what it means is that your output token, or the model, can generate up to 2096 tokens in its response, right? Because anything that is generated after that, it will lose the previous context. That is what it means by that. So total was 4096, which means that if you use 2000 say input tokens, then your output tokens available to you are 2096 before it starts aging out, right? It will continue to generate the response, but the concern here is it will start aging out the previous part, right? So I think with this you get a good understanding. Why it's important? So why it's important? Because a shorter context length, right? The models with shorter context length, they are good for short tasks. Now short tasks could be completing a sentence, right? But models that require longer context length, let's say you are summarizing a book, or you are summarizing several chapters of a book, obviously it needs to store that context so that it can summarize that information for you. Or it's needed for more complex tasks. More complex tasks would need a longer context length. So examples we have given is summarizing a long article or holding a detailed conversation, right? So it says, imagine how you understand by example. So imagine you're telling a story to a friend, but they can only remember last 5 sentences. So let's say you are telling a story. This is sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3, sentence 4, sentence 5, sentence 6. As soon as sentence 6 comes, you forget this one, right? So this is how it's trying to explain. So you say, you start with once upon a time there was a brave knight. You keep adding details, but once you read the sixth sentence, your friend forgets the first one. So your friend has forgotten the first one. It only remembers this part, or in its memory has only this information. That is what context length is all about. Right? So how it works? So it's pretty simple. As I explained, the model processes and remembers the input text to generate the relevant responses. There's a direct correlation to the amount of memory that is available to you. So it can only remember up to a certain number of words or tokens, a unit of text like words or parts. And the older context gets forgotten. Something what I explained here with sentence 1 to sentence 6. So after sentence 5, you forget the sentence 1. So when the input exceeds the context length, older parts are forgotten and only the most recent is used. Again, the example of 4096 context length, if your input already used 2000 tokens, then your output tokens available to you are something like 2096. Over and above that, you will start forgetting the input tokens as well, right? So this is what it means by context length. I think you get a good understanding of context length.